Christmas has a way of asking something from all of us. And it doesn't do it loudly, not aggressively. It doesn't usually come as a demand. It comes as an atmosphere. It comes through familiar songs, through traditions that seem harmless, and through rooms you have been in before, and with people who know a version of you that feels familiar. Christmas does not attack, but it asks. It asks you to show up, to gather, to participate, to be present, to be grateful, and to be okay. And for many people, that request doesn't land in the mind first. It lands in the body. And you might notice it as slight tightness, like a subtle alertness in the sense of preparing yourself without quite knowing what for. And still, if someone asks you how you are feeling, you would probably say, "It's fine. It's nice. It's okay." And you might even mean it. Because this isn't about something being wrong, right? It's about something being familiar. There is a particular experience I want to speak to today. It is not the obvious one. It's not the dramatic version of Christmas stress that we all experience. But what I want to talk about is something much more quiet. It is one where nothing really happens. You're like, why am I here? But afterwards, you feel very tired. So, you don't feel physically tired in the way that sleep fixes, but you have a deeper fatigue after Christmas. Like something in you was slightly braced the entire time, like you were present, but not fully. You were not fully inside yourself. And if that is you, I want to say this clearly and early on. I just want to say that you are not imagining it. And there is nothing wrong with you. Many people I speak to say the same thing. And they almost say it word for word. It sounds the same. They'll say, my family is actually very fine. And we get along. Nothing bad happens. Nothing bad has happened. And then almost, as an afterthought, they say, I'm just completely exhausted when it is over. And that exhaustion does not come from conflict. It does not come from getting stressed up over the Christmas gifts or what to cook or eat. It comes from containment. It comes from holding yourself in a certain way. It comes from staying attuned. It comes from being just a little bit careful. Not because anyone asked you to, but because something in you learned how to do that a long time ago. So in this episode, it is not about how to fix Christmas. It is not about setting boundaries or having difficult conversation or changing anyone else's behavior. It is not about confronting. It is not about connecting. It is not about explaining yourself. This is not a do better this year kind of conversation. This is about understanding something much more subtle. It is about noticing where you quietly adjust yourself and what that adjustment has cost you over time. Because self-abandonment, for most people, doesn't look dramatic. It looks very polite. It looks like being agreeable, like being easy, like being flexible, like being understanding. It looks like staying a little longer than your body actually wants. It looks like laughing at something that didn't quite land and letting something pass because, well, it's not worth taking the fight. And it looks like saying yes internally before anyone even asked the question. And often you don't even realizing it is happening until afterwards, until you're home again, until you're alone, and until your body finally lets go. And suddenly the tiredness arrives. And if you're listening to this and you're thinking, but I've done so much work on myself, I'm self-aware, I know my patterns, I want you to stay with me, because this isn't about insight, and it's not about failure or growth. It is about context. It is like certain environments ask things of us simply by existing. And Christmas, with its rituals and expectations and emotional history, is one of those environments. It brings us back into all of the old rooms, old dynamics, all the old rhythms. Even if your life looks completely different now, even if you have changed, even if you have grown, the body remembers familiarity much faster than the mind remembers progress. What I want to offer you in this space is not an explanation to analyze anything, but a recognition that you can feel. A sense of being seen in something you may not have had language for. Because often, the hardest part isn't Christmas itself. It is the feeling that you should be handling it better by now. That you should be more immune. That you should be more detached. That you should be more unaffected. And when you are not, when you still feel that pull to adjust and to soften and to manage yourself, shame can creep in. And it can come subtle, maybe unspoken. I want you to imagine, for just a moment, that this Christmas, nothing has to change. That you don't need to become someone else. That you don't need to handle it better than last year. What if the only thing that mattered was noticing what happens inside you without judging it, not fixing it, not stopping it, just recognizing it? Because recognition is not confrontation. Recognition is presence. If you're listening to this while preparing to see your family, or while you are already there, or maybe even afterwards when you're trying to make sense of why you feel the way you do, I want you to know that this episode is meant to feel like company, not instruction. I don't want to tell you what to do. You don't need to take notes today. You don't need to remember anything. You don't need to apply this. You just need to let yourself be here, in a space where nothing is being asked of you. Christmas already asks a lot. It asks us to step into roles, to meet expectations, to recreate a feeling of togetherness that doesn't always match our inner experience. And when you have spent years being the one who adapts, the one who senses the room, and the one who keeps things smooth, that asking can feel heavier, even when no one says a word. That doesn't mean that you are weak. It means you are perceptive. It means you learned how to belong by paying attention. So as we begin this conversation, I want to set one thing very clearly. You are not here to be corrected. You are not here to be improved. You are not here because something is wrong with you. You are here because something in you is just so tired of disappearing. And you're curious. You're curious about what it might feel like to stay, even just a little. And we'll move gently together. There is usually a moment, and it is rarely the moment you think it is. It is not the argument. It is not the tension. It is not the obvious discomfort. It is much earlier than that, and much, much quieter. It often happens before anyone notices anything has shifted. sometimes before you even do. It is the moment you adjust. It might be the moment when you walk into the room and you feel the temperature of it. You don't consciously think, I need to change. You just do. Your shoulders soften a little, your voice becomes lighter, and your words more careful. Not false, just edited. You are still you, okay? Everyone is recognizing you. You are still you. You're just slightly more manageable version. Maybe you notice it when you are telling a story. You are about to say something honest and something real, and then mid-sentence, you change direction. You simplify it. You soften the edges, and you turn it into something easier to receive. And not because anyone asked you to, but because something in you already knew. It already knew which version would land better. That is one of the first places people leave themselves, not by lying, but by diluting. Or maybe it happens around the table, like the conversation takes a turn and someone says something that doesn't fully sit right in your body. Nothing outrageous, nothing worth making a thing out of it. So you just smile, you nod, you let it pass. You might even laugh. And not because you think it's funny, but because laughing keeps the moment moving. It keeps it light. It keeps it smooth. Inside you, something contracts. Just a little. But it is subtle enough that you almost miss it. This is important to understand. Most people don't abandon themselves in one big moment. They do it in 1,000 small ones. Moments so socially acceptable that no one would ever question them, including you. You might notice it in how long you stay. Your body is done. You can feel it. And the tiredness isn't sudden, it's there. It's knocking. But you tell yourself, just a little longer. I'm just gonna stay a little longer. It would be weird to leave now. I don't want to be difficult. So you stay. And staying doesn't feel terrible in the moment. It just feel like slightly off, like I'm tired, I want to leave, but yeah, I can't go just yet. Like you're overriding something quiet and wise. Sometimes it shows up in your breathing, so you don't notice it consciously, but your breath gets a little shallower. You're listening, tracking, responding. Your body is present, but not at rest. And again, nothing here is wrong. You're not panicking. You're not anxious. You're just managing. Self-abandonment doesn't feel like betrayal. It feels like being good at being human. It feels like being adaptable, emotionally intelligent, socially skilled. It feels like knowing how to read the room. And often, you were praised for this. You learned early that this ability made things easier for everyone involved. So when it happens now, it doesn't raise alarms. It feels normal, natural. But there is a cost. And the cost usually doesn't show up until much later. When you're home again, when you are alone, when there is nothing left to manage. That is when the exhaustion arrives. And not because you did too much, but because you were just slightly away from yourself for too long. And if you are listening and thinking, but these are such small things. Exactly. That is why they are powerful. Because no one would tell you to stop doing them. And because they don't look like self-abandonment, they look like maturity. Let's slow this down a little bit. The moment you leave yourself is often a felt sense before it is a thought. It might feel like a soft tightening in the chest, a subtle holding in the jaw, a quiet resignation that says, It is easier this way. You don't argue with that voice, you trust it, because it once kept you safe. You're not choosing to abandon yourself. Your body is choosing familiarity. It is choosing the version of you that learned how to belong. And for many people, belonging once came with a requirement by being agreeable, be easy, be low maintenance, be attuned. So now, in moments that even resemble togetherness, that version steps forward automatically. Not because you are weak, but because it worked. You might notice this especially if you are someone who has done a lot of inner work. You know yourself. You value honesty. You value presence. Yet, in these environments, you still find yourself slipping into old patterns. That can be very confusing, and it can be quite disappointing. But this isn't a regression. It is a reminder. Certain contexts activate certain selves, and Christmas is a context rich with memory. Even if nothing bad happened, even if nothing bad happens, even if things were fine, and even if things are fine, your body doesn't respond to logic. It responds to association. So, the subtle disappearance might look like choosing words that feel safer than truer, or staying pleasant instead of present, or monitoring yourself instead of resting, or offering understanding before being understood yourself. And none of this is wrong, but it is revealing. And the moment I want you to really feel into is the second you notice this happening. You often judge yourself for it. You think, why am I doing this? I should know better. I've worked through this. And that judgment pulls you even further away, because now, not only as you are adjusting, you're also disappointed in yourself for adjusting. And this is where compassion matters. What if, instead of asking, why am I like this? You asked, what did this once protect me from? Not to analyze, not to dig, just to acknowledge the intelligence of it. Because once, this adaptation was not optional, it was how you stayed connected. And now, it is simply out of date, but the body hasn't been informed yet. In this phase, this subtle disappearance is not something you just stop. It is something you notice. And noticing doesn't mean you suddenly stay perfectly present. It just means you catch the moment a little earlier. Instead of realizing it days later, you might realize it while it is happening. And that is already a shift. So, if this Christmas you find yourself laughing a little too quickly, agreeing a little too easily, or staying a little too long, I don't want you to clamp down on it. I want you to see it, to recognize the exact moment your system says, this is how we stay safe. And to meet that moment with kindness, because self-abandonment isn't dramatic. It is polite, it is quiet, it is socially rewarded, and once you see it, you can never fully unsee it. That is not a burden. It is an opening. And from that opening, something else becomes possible. Not forcing yourself to be different, but allowing yourself to stay just a fraction more with what you are actually feeling. And not into fixing, but into what it means to remain in your body without leaving the room. Most of what you do on Christmas is not a decision. It is an agreement. And you did not consciously sign it. We like to believe that we choose how we show up, that we decide in the moment who we are going to be. But the truth is that long before your adult self had language, logic, or choice, your body made deals. It made deals. Quite once, but made deals. Deals like sounded like safety. And let me explain what I mean. An unconscious contract is not a thought. It is not a belief you can argue with. It is a felt agreement your nervous system made at a time when it had one job: to stay connected. Not to stay authentic, not to stay expressed, stay connected. For me, Christmas stopped being a shared holiday very early in my life. From the outside, it looked like independence, strength, maturity. But inside, something else was happening completely. I learned very young that I couldn't rely on Christmas to hold me, so my body started to adapt. And it didn't adapt with sadness, but it adapted with strategy. So somewhere along the way, my system learned that don't need too much. Don't expect anything. Handle it yourself. And not because anyone said it out loud, but because the body always draws conclusions. And those conclusions become rules. So when I later found myself around people during the holidays, like friends or a partner, gatherings, I wasn't consciously thinking, I need to be easy. But my body already knew the contract. Like, I'll take up less space, I won't be a burden, I won't need anything from this moment. And that wasn't a flaw, that was intelligence. And this is where I want you to pause with me. Because when we talk about self-abandonment, people often go straight to self-judgment. Like, why do I do this? Why can't I just be myself? But what if the better question is, what did my body learn it had to do in order to belong? Unconscious contracts are not dramatic. They don't sound like ultimatums. They sound like whispers, like, I will be easy. I won't take up space. I will manage myself so others do not have to. You don't hear them as sentences, you just feel them as impulses, like an instinct. Like, yeah, like a internal yes before anyone even asks. And these were not contracts you chose because something was wrong with you. You chose them because they worked. They kept you included. They kept you safe. They kept you connected. And at the time, they were the smartest options available. Your nervous system is not sentimental. It is efficient. If someone once prevented rejection, conflict, or loneliness, it gets stored as a solution. And Christmas, more than almost any other time of the year, activates those old solutions. Because Christmas isn't just a date, it is a symbol. It is a symbol of togetherness, of belonging, of family, of closeness. And if closeness once came with conditions, your body remembers that faster than your mind ever could. So when you find yourself staying agreeable and minimizing your needs or making yourself emotionally low maintenance, it doesn't mean that you're weak. It's just because your system is saying, this is how we stay included. And I want to be very honest here. Even after years of doing inner work myself, after awareness and growth, I still notice this in myself. I could walk into a Christmas setting and feel calm, not anxious, not overwhelmed, but braced. Like I was already preparing not to need anything. And that preparedness felt normal. But normal does not mean neutral, because the cost of that contract was that I never fully arrived. I was there, but I wasn't receiving. And that is something many people don't realize. That self-abandonment isn't just about giving too much. It is about not letting anything in. When your contract says, I will manage myself so others don't have to, what it really means is, I won't let myself be held. And that can feel safer, but it is also lonelier. And of course, you're not broken for having these contracts. You're not behind. You're not failing at healing. You're simply still loyal to an old agreement. And that old agreement once made sense, right? And loyalty, it runs deep in the nervous system, and especially when it is connected to love. And the goal of this episode is not to rip these contracts away. That would feel violent to the system. The goal is to see them clearly. Because once something becomes conscious, it is no longer going to run the entire show. So if this Christmas you notice yourself thinking, I don't want to be difficult. It is easier if I just go along with it, or like I'll deal with my feelings later. I want you to hear that not as failure, but as information. That is your contract speaking, not your truth. And contracts can be renegotiated, not with force, not with confrontation, but with awareness and with compassion. Because the moment you realize, oh, this isn't the flaw, this was protection, something softens, and the shame drops away, and suddenly you're no longer fighting yourself, you're listening. And that is where real change begins. Not by becoming someone new, but by honoring the intelligence that carried you here. And gently letting it know we don't need this one in the same way anymore. There is a thought I hear again and again, and maybe you have had this thought as well. It usually sounds like, but I thought I had healed this. It comes after exhaustion, after adjustment, after you notice yourself shrinking just a little again, and suddenly the disappointment turns inward. Why is this still happening? Why am I still affected? Why do I feel like this when nothing bad ever happened? Let me say this clearly. This thought, I should be past this by now, is not wisdom. It is shame. It is shame dressed up as self-awareness, and it keeps a lot of people stuck. Somewhere along the way, healing got marketed as immunity. Like if you have done enough inner work, you should walk into old environments untouched, unbothered, unchanged, above it. But that is not how the human nervous system works. Healing does not mean you stop having responses. Healing means you understand your responses without turning against yourself. That is a big difference. Insight does not erase conditioning. Awareness does not delete memory. Growth does not mean your body forgets where it learned to survive. You can be emotionally intelligent, you can be self-aware, you can be regulated in your day-to-day life, and still walk into a familiar room and feel something old turn on. And not because you failed, but because familiarity activates memory. Your nervous system doesn't respond to timelines. It responds to cues. The same house, the same smells, the same roles, the same tone of voices. And suddenly, the part of you that learned how to belong there steps forward automatically. This isn't weakness. This is biology. And I want you to think about it like this. Your brain has well-worn neural pathways. Roads it has traveled thousands of times. Christmas environments are like turning onto an old street. Your system doesn't stop to ask, do we still need this road? It just goes, oh, I know this place. And it drives. So, When you catch yourself adjusting, people pleasing, staying quiet, or managing yourself, that is not your healing failing. That is your nervous system prioritizing safety over insight. And it will do that every single time. If you expect yourself to walk into emotionally loaded environments and feel nothing, you're holding yourself to an impossible standard. And that standard is not love. I remember having moments where I would notice myself contracting and then immediately turn on myself. Really? After everything I worked through, why am I still like this? And that inner reaction, that hurt more than the original contraction. Because now I wasn't just adapting, I was shaming myself for adapting. And that is what spiritual bypassing often looks like in real life. It's not pretending things do not hurt, but believing they shouldn't anymore. If you grew up needing to adapt to stay connected, your nervous system will always check for safety in relational spaces. Always. That doesn't disappear. What changes is how you relate to that response. You don't outgrow your past by overpowering it. You outgrow it by meeting it differently. So instead of saying, why am I still doing this? What if the question became, can I be kind to myself here? Not permissive, not indulgent, just kind. Kindness sounds like, of course this part showed up. This environment means something to my body and I don't need to punish myself for responding. There is no version of healing where your body stops caring about belonging. Belonging is wired into you. So when you walk into spaces that once mattered deeply, your system pays attention. That is not pathology, that is humanity. The real shift happens when you stop asking your nervous system to be someone it is not, when you stop demanding immunity and start offering safety. Because safety doesn't come from insight. Safety comes from self-trust. It comes from knowing that when something old activates, you won't abandon yourself on top of it. So if this Christmas you notice yourself thinking, I should be more evolved than this, I want you to pause and replace that thought with something truer. I am human, and I'm learning how to stay with myself here. And that sentence alone can change everything, because now you're not fighting your response, you're walking alongside it. The goal of healing was never to become untouchable. The goal was to become self-supportive, to stop turning against yourself in moments that already feel vulnerable. You don't need to be harder on yourself. You've already done that for years. What you need now is something else. You need permission to be affected without making it mean you are failing. And when that permission lands, something softens. And the body doesn't have to defend as much because it knows, like, even if this comes up, I won't be alone with it. That is the difference. And from that place, we can start talking about what it looks like to stay in your body, to stay in it without forcing yourself to be someone that you are not. You're not perfect, not all at once. Just honesty. Gentle. You haven't failed your healing. You are in it. And you're allowed to meet yourself here with compassion instead of pressure. That is where trust is built. And at this point, a lot of people ask, okay, but what do I actually do? What do I do now? Can you tell me? And I want to be very careful here, because the moment this turns into instructions, your nervous system goes right back into performance, and that is not what we are doing. This part is not about changing your behavior. this part is about changing where you place your attention, because you do not leave yourself all at once. You leave yourself in tiny moments, which means you don't have to come back all at once either. Staying in your body doesn't mean you suddenly say everything you think all at once. It doesn't mean you take up more space. It doesn't mean you set boundaries and speak up or disrupt anything. It means something so much smaller, much quieter. It means noticing. Noticing when your breath changes, when a comment lands and your chest tightens just a little, when you feel yourself lean forward energetically, ready to manage, ready to smooth, ready to fix. That noticing is not passive. It is presence. You might catch it when you are about to respond quickly. The words are already forming. And before you say them, you pause for half a second, and not to censor yourself, just to feel. Am I here now? Or am I performing this? That pause is enough. Staying doesn't mean you stop adjusting. It means you feel yourself adjusting. And there is a huge difference, because the moment you are aware, you are not gone. Sometimes staying looks like letting your shoulders drop. Sometimes it looks like exhaling fully instead of holding your breath while listening. Sometimes it is as simple as asking yourself internally, what would staying feel like right now? Not what would changing feel like, not what would fixing feel like. Just staying. And staying might only be possible for a few seconds. That counts. This is not an all or nothing practice. It is not about being present the whole evening. It is about returning again and again and again. There may be moments where you still disappear, where you laugh automatically, where you agree, where you override your body. That is okay. That is not a test. Presence is not measured by consistency. It is measured by gentleness, by how quickly you stop turning against yourself when you notice you've left. You don't need to stay the whole time to be in integrity with yourself. You don't need to handle this perfectly. You don't need to transform anything. If the only thing you do this Christmas is notice, oh, I just left myself there, and then offer yourself kindness instead of criticism, that is staying. You're not trying to win Christmas. You're not trying to graduate from your past. You are just practicing not disappearing completely. And that is more than enough. Because every time you stay even a little, every time you breathe, soften, or feel your feet on the ground, your nervous system learns something new. It learns, I can be here and still be safe. Not perfectly, not all the time, but enough. So let go of the idea that you need to do this right. There is no right way. There is only presence. And presence doesn't demand effort. It only asks for attention. You're allowed to stay a little. That's it. That's the practice. And it is already working. I want to talk about success for a little moment, because most people walk into Christmas with the wrong metric. They don't say it out loud, but somewhere inside, success sounds like everyone get along, nothing feels awkward, I don't rock the boat, I'm easy to be around. And if that happens, they think, good Christmas. If it doesn't happen, they think, I failed. But I want to tell you something. That metric was never yours. It was survival dressed up as success. A quote-unquote good Christmas is not one where you disappear smoothly. It is not one where no one notices your discomfort. It is not one where you earn belonging by being low maintenance. That is not success. That is endurance. I want you to try, just for this year, just as an experiment, what if a good Christmas wasn't measured by harmony, but by presence? Not perfect presence, not constant presence, but honest presence. What if success looked like noticing when your body tightens and not shaming yourself for it, and realizing you just adjusted and coming back to yourself instead of criticizing it, or feeling tired and understanding why instead of judging it? Even noticing the moment you leave yourself is already a return. You didn't fail. You came back. We have been taught to think of self-abandonment as a mistake, something you shouldn't do, something you need to eliminate. But that is not how change works. You don't stop leaving yourself by demanding perfection. You stop leaving yourself by recognizing when it happens. Presence is not about staying the whole time. It is about returning sooner and returning more kindly. So if this Christmas you catch yourself thinking, I did it again, I want you to pause and I want you to reframe that moment. Because what actually happened was this. I noticed. And noticing means you were conscious. And consciousness is not failure, it is progress. You didn't lose yourself. You found yourself, even if only for a second. And that second matters. You're not behind because this still shows up. You're not failing because you felt affected. You're not less healed because you needed gentleness. You are human, and you're learning how to stay. A successful Christmas might look like leaving a conversation and placing a hand on your chest, taking one full breath instead of pushing through, or going to bed and saying, that was enough for today. That counts. That matters. Success might look quieter than you expect, less impressive, less visible, but much more honest. Every time you return to yourself, even briefly, your nervous system learns a new ending. It learns that togetherness doesn't have to cost you everything. That you can be here. You can be here without disappearing completely. That is not small. That is foundational. So if you end this Christmas not feeling triumphant, but feeling more aware, more tender, more honest, you did not fail. You came back. And that is a beautiful place to land. If you are still here with me, I want to acknowledge something. This might be your first conscious Christmas. Not perfect, not healed, not different on the outside, just seen. And that matters more than you think. You may go back into a room where nothing has changed. Same people, same dynamics, same expectations. And I want you to hear this clearly. You do not need to change anyone else in order to stay with yourself. You do not need to explain. You do not need to correct. You do not need to prove how much you have grown. Your work is quieter than that. Your work is to notice, to feel your breath, to stay one moment longer when you can, and to forgive yourself when you cannot. That is enough. And if at any point you feel yourself disappearing again, and you probably will, I don't want you to panic. I want you to remember this. Leaving yourself doesn't mean that you are lost. It means that you are human, and returning is always possible as a human being. You can come back in a breath. You can come back in a softening. You can come back in a moment of honesty with yourself, and no one else has to notice. This is between you and you. If this Christmas feels tender, quiet, or a little raw, that doesn't mean something went wrong. It might mean something finally became honest. And honesty is a form of safety. And I want you to imagine, just for a little moment, that as you move through the rest of this season, you are not doing it alone. Even in the moments where you feel unseen, there's a part of you that knows what is happening now, a part of you that stays. You don't need to be brave. You don't need to be strong. You just need to be kind to the parts of you that learned how to survive by being easy. They are not wrong. They're just ready to rest. So, as you go back into whatever comes next, into the room, to the table, to the conversation, take this with you. You are allowed to stay connected without disappearing. You're allowed to be here and be you, even quietly. And if at any point you forget that, you can come back to this space, to this reminder, to this presence. I'm really glad that you are here, that you have stayed here. And until next time, stay aligned, stay curious, and most important of all, stay true to yourself.